Chapter 5, Key Issue 1, is about where languages are distributed. So we're going to go over the largest language families. We're going to talk about the distribution of the two largest language families. And we're going to look at the names and distribution of the largest language families in addition to the Indo-European and Sino-Tibetan. Language, what is language when we're talking about it? Language is a system of communication through speech. It's a collection of sounds that a group of people understand to have the same meaning. And language is part of culture. And so we know that culture is learned and culture is shared. So while you might have an endangered language where everyone else who spoke it died out and there's only one person left, you can't really create a language that only you speak. So you can't create a language for just yourself. It needs to be a shared pattern. Language is different than speech because language has arbitrary meanings and speech is just the words that we speak. So language is when you understand it. A literary tradition refers to written communication. So written language. When we talk about literary tradition, we're talking about somebody having a written language. Many countries designate at least one official language to be used for official documents and public objects like roads, signs, and money. But not all countries have an official language designated. So the United States doesn't have an official universal language. So the U.S. did not designate a language as its official language. The de facto, right, like English is the language of the United States in a practical purpose, but it's never been designated so at a federal level. There are some states that have declared English their official language, but our country hasn't. So there's no technical official language in the United States, although for a practical purpose, English is clearly the language used in government. When we look at the different languages in the world, of which there are thousands of languages, which you wouldn't be able to memorize in this class even if you wanted to, I think. So you don't have to. But there are thousands and thousands of languages, and we organize them. We organize them the same way you organize, very similar to how we organize animals and plants when you look at taxonomy. So you remember like classification, if you've studied that at all in biology. We have kingdoms, right? Kingdoms and then phylums. Language gets divided like that too. And language changes and evolves. And so we make language trees. They'll be very similar to like phylogenetic trees or cladogram trees. And you might have made those in science class. So the biggest group for language is language family. So language families are a collection of languages that are related through a common ancestral language. So language family is the largest, most inclusive group. So you will have less language families. That's the biggest group. So the actual languages fit into these subgroups. Then you have language branch. And language branch is a little bit smaller than language family. It's going to branch off of a family. It's a collection of languages within a family related through common ancestral language. And so the differences are not as significant or as old as between families. So languages are more closely related between the branches. And then you have language groups. And language groups are a collection of languages within a branch that have a common origin in the relatively recent past and have similarity between their grammar and vocabulary. Let's kind of look at what that means. Just some more facts for you first. The 2/3 of the world's population speak a language that belongs to either the Indo-European or the Sino-Tibetan language family. 2 to 6% of the world's population speak a language that fits into one of 7 other language families. The remainder of a population speaks a language belonging to one of 100 smaller families. So most people speak languages in the Indo-European and Sino-Tibetan language families. All right, so when you're looking at this picture here, let's look at the Sino-Tibetan first. So the Sino-Tibetan family, right? Here's our Sino-Tibetan family. And off of the Sino-Tibetan family, lots of different languages branch off. So you've got your branches here. So you've got languages in the Tibetan-Burman family, you've got languages in the Semitic family, and you've got languages in the Tai-Kadal family group. I'm sorry, these are all branches. So this is all the family here, Sino-Tibetan, and these are all the different branches that come off of that language family. So here's one big grouping. So this would be like saying we're looking at vertebrates, and then these branches could be mammals, and then reptiles, and then fish. And then off of these different languages, these big leaves here, these would be the different species. And so you get Mandarin, right? And Mandarin has so many people speaking it that it gets its own giant leaf. Languages that have less people speaking them will have smaller leaves, and some of them will still be grouped together. So family, branch, group. So these are language groups, but some languages are so large that they have their own group, like Mandarin. So many people speak Mandarin that they get their own language group. So let's look over here at languages that are maybe easier for us to relate to. Indo-European. This is the language family. And from the Indo-European language family branched off several other language branches. So we have the West Germanic, we have Indo-Aryan, we have the Baltic Slavic, and then we have the Romance. And Romance is one that you've probably heard the term of, right? So from Romance comes some other language groups. And we have Portuguese, French, Spanish, Neapolitan, Romanian. So these language groups or languages are more closely related to each other than they are to the other ones that come off of this branch, and are more closely related to each other than the other language groups that came off of this family. So it's just like if you're looking at like a classification tree in biology. And we'll go over this a little bit in class too, because it can be tricky. So where does English fall in here? English is in the Indo-European language family. It is on the Germanic branch, particularly the West Germanic branch. And so English has most of its words coming from the West Germanic language and is related to and in the Indo-European family. And English is also stolen, right? We've also stolen and adopted many phrases from this Romance language because we're pretty closely related. It's easier for us to adopt terms from countries that, one, England was closer to geographically, and languages that were closer to English, as far as classification goes. So we have more words that we've kind of stolen or adopted from this area than we would from Mandarin. So the two largest language families are Indo-European, of which that's where our language comes from. It's the predominant family in Europe, South Asia, North America, and Latin America. And then the Sino-Tibetan, which encompasses language spoken in the People's Republic of China and other countries in Southeast Asia. There's no single Chinese language, but Mandarin, so you don't speak Chinese. Most people speak Mandarin. Mandarin is the most used language in the world and the official language of the People's Republic of China and Taiwan. But again, no one speaks Chinese. There are many languages spoken in China, and Mandarin is the most used. Here you can see the distribution of languages. And we're looking at language families here, not individual languages, because there are so many languages, it would be impossible to memorize those patterns. So you're looking at places that have at least 10 million native speakers. So here, you've got the Niger-Congo branch. Here you got the Afro-Asiatic branch. And so this map is very similar to one that we'll be mapping in class on Monday. So you want to know the general distribution patterns. Some other Asian language families are spoken by large numbers of people in the East and Southeast Asia. So aside from Mandarin, you have the Austronesian, Austroasiatic, Tai-Kadai, Japanese, and Korean language. These languages are spoken these language families are represented in areas that were a little isolated for a while. So usually isolation occurs on islands or peninsulas because it was more difficult for people to reach them. It's more difficult to spread and diffuse until we had more modern technology. And so the same thing happens in biology too, right? You're going to have more unique species on islands. It's called the island effect. And the same thing happens to language, because language grows almost like language spreads and changes and develops almost like a living creature. And so if you're isolating it, it's going to have less interaction with other language families, and it's going to be less likely to adopt those changes, and it's going to be more likely to have its own tiny changes within the island, like almost like language mutations. Just like how the only place you can find lemurs other than zoos would be on the island of Madagascar. The only place we have large numbers of marsupials still is on Australia, which is a giant island continent kind of off by itself. So that isolation for animals leads to the same isolation for languages. So Southwest Asia, North Africa, and Central Asia tend to speak either languages from the Afro-Asiatic family or the Altic family. So Arabic is the major language, the official language in 24 countries in Southwest Asia and North Africa, or essentially the Middle East. And it's one of 6 official languages in the UN. On the coast of Europe, between Europe and Asia, so when you get to Southwest Asia and Western Europe, you're going to get things like the Altic language family, like Turkish. So the Altic language family is going to be the official language of several countries in the Soviet Union when it broke up. So like Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, and Turkmenistan. African language families, there are more than 1,000 distinct languages documented in Africa. And there are several thousand dialects recognized. And most of these languages don't have a written tradition, but more than 1,000 languages alone in Africa, which is why we're not memorizing languages. We're mostly looking at language families and then groups and then branches. The Niger Congo is a big language. It's a language family that Swahili came from. Swahili is a language that's used to speak with outsiders from different villages. It's the first language of over 800,000 people, and it's spoken by 30 million Africans. So while there's over 1,000 languages in Africa, Swahili is the big one. And if you look at this map of Africa, you can see that up here in North Africa, most people are speaking languages from the Afro-Asiatic family. Right here, we've got the Austronesian language family. So in Madagascar, it speaks something more similar to Australia and Asia. Indo-European down here, because South Africa was colonized by the English. The Niger-Congo family, the Nilo-Saharan family spread out throughout parts of sub-Saharan Africa, and then the Cohesion family down here. And that's it for Chapter 5, Key Issue 1.